Hello and welcome to another ADA Q&A opportunity for you to ask questions of myself, Jess Segovia, ADA Guru, and I do specialize in all things ADA compliance related to the operating requirements of the ADA. So yes, I know about some vehicle specification. I could probably do a decent job helping with some guidance on facility accessibility. I'm really good at finding answers and information in the regulations, but I would say my expertise is definitely the operating requirements, right? Our policies and procedures related to how our drivers and operators, you all know I use van drivers and bus operator language, how our staff is required to provide assistance to our passengers with disabilities, and how we deal with issues of denying service to people with disabilities when we think it's needed and justified, and lots of other elements that affect our operation, right? What are our goals in operation? To be safe, compliant, consistent, right? And let's say, obviously, to meet the needs of our passengers. So there's some sort of passenger satisfaction element there. And we could add a fifth, budget, to stay within budget. There are fiscal realities. And so these are all of the concepts and things that I take into consideration in my work with helping agencies around the country. Uh, there are lots of topics for you to choose from. Of course, non-discrimination requirements, the ways that we provide assistance, including to passengers using wheelchairs. Service animals is always a favorite topic. Direct threat denial of service, that is the guidance to help us deny service when we think needed. And of course, there is the world of ADA paratransit, our most expensive and maybe most complicated service that we provide because it has the most strings and perhaps the most requirements, right? And what I'm seeing and hearing around the country is that ADA paratransit services are growing beyond the capacity and budget of many agencies. And there is no indication that that is going to change. That's the feedback that I'm receiving. And so we need to, of course, be compliant. And in paratransit, we cannot deny trips, or actually, we cannot have a pattern of trip denials, right? And we have an on-time percentage and all of those other elements. And so these are the things that we talk about for the most part, the challenges related to ADA paratransit. And there are other topics as well. So many of you have started to type your questions into chat. So that's wonderful. I do have a training coming up in Hawaii, Training in Paradise, I'm calling it. We only have about 10 spots left. So please don't wait too long to register. This is going to be somewhat of an intimate training experience. It won't be hundreds and hundreds of people. Definitely not that. And so you can find information on my website, adaguru.co. Not .com, adaguru.co. I also will be at some conferences coming up in South Carolina, the Task Conference, August 19th through 21st, and the ERSTA in Utah, September 10th through 12th. So those are the next few conferences that I will be at, presenting at both, and I believe having a booth at both, or at least I know for sure at the Task Conference I will have a booth, but we can always find opportunity to talk. Lastly, let me share, I just released a new webinar training schedule and I added some new webinars. We have paratransit eligibility, which is the most popular webinar that we offer. And that is on October 2nd. Improving Driver ADA Training Program. That's a new topic in the webinar form, and we go into great detail how to improve your program, how to make the information more understandable, right? What tools, what ways can we be creative? And so that's a great training, September 9th. Enhancing ADA oversight. How do we observe our operators to ensure ADA compliance? What does our program look like? How often do we observe them in service? What kind of content should be on our form? What do we do with that data, right? How do we generate data? How do we use it to make our services better and improve over time? So that is September 16th. And then managing the ADA complaints investigation process. All of our agencies are required to take ADA complaints and investigate them and come to some kind of resolution or determination. What does your process look like? In my work, 20, almost 27 years now, I have seen, I would say at least 2/3 of all ADA related complaints have multiple ADA elements. The driver was rude. They wouldn't help me get on the bus. They partially secured my wheelchair. That's three elements. Does your program, your system, have the ability to capture all three and have a determination separately for all three? So we'll go into great detail on proven processes that I have used in my career to get the best data out of complaints. The ADA and FTA believes that ADA complaints are perhaps the best way that we get feedback from the disability community, from our riders with disabilities on their experiences using our services. So let me start today's discussion with one of our favorite topics, oversized and heavy wheelchairs. So here is the ADA regulation, right? 2.4.1, accommodating riders using wheelchairs. When we are dealing with wheelchairs that are larger or heavy, the entity must carry the wheelchair and occupant if the lift and vehicle can accommodate the wheelchair and occupant. So that part right there, right? We have to make a determination. Can the lift or ramp, etc., accommodate the weight? We cannot make a decision based on an observation, right? I'm looking. I can't tell whether someone's wheelchair exceeds the weight capacity of our lift or not, right? First of all, we need to know what is the rating, the weight rating of our lift. So that's very important. If we have multiple vehicles in our fleet, we could have lifts that are rated differently. So that's pretty significant as well. So we probably have to give them the opportunity to board, right? And then it says in yellow, the entity may decline to carry a passenger if the combined weight exceeds that of the lift specifications or if it demonstrates that there is a legitimate safety requirement, safety concern. So this means we make an attempt when we think it's reasonable to do this. We make an attempt to board the customer, and if the equipment does not work the way it's supposed to, if a vehicle starts to lean, if the equipment starts to make a noise that it should not make, we should shut that down immediately, right? We now have proof of a safety concern. And so it's a very high standard to meet. We don't make these decisions. Oh, I'm looking at your wheelchair. I think you and the wheelchair combined are too heavy. No. That's why a lot of agencies in the paratransit eligibility determination process, in the in-person process, they weigh the person in their wheelchair. So I've come across that element, and then that gets recorded. So here is the guidance straight out of the ADA. Here is the discussion. That's why I love the ADA circular, because it is the requirement followed by discussion. And it says here, transit agencies must transport wheelchairs if their devices meet the definition of a wheelchair. We reviewed the definition together last ADA Q&A. Wheelchairs that are 3 or more wheels, designed, used, modified by people with mobility disabilities, usable indoors, right? That is the definition of a wheelchair. So if it can be accommodated, it fits on the lift, it fits on the ramp, the equipment can manage the weight, etc., then the person rides, right? Agencies may only decline transport when the occupant in the wheelchair would be inconsistent with legitimate safety requirements. So again, if there is a safety concern, a real existing safety issue. And that's really important that it be an existing safety issue, not in anticipation of an unsafe situation. We cannot deny service to someone because we anticipate that something is going to go wrong. I get this a lot with agencies wanting to create policies. We're going to deny service if you cannot power your wheelchair off, if you cannot set your brakes, if you cannot, what's the other really popular one? If you're missing footrests or armrests, if you're missing the posture belt, the belt that is on some wheelchairs, they want to deny service if all of those things are missing. There is no safety issue because those things are missing. When we can't anticipate that there will be one. Now, if there is a history, if we have incidents where there have been safety concerns and issues, the person keeps getting injured by dragging their feet, now we have proof. We don't make decisions based on the anticipation of a safety issue, okay? Of course, the discussion continues that the vehicle must comply with the ADA minimum requirements, which states that lifts must accommodate at a minimum 600 pounds, and that the wheelchair securement areas on your vehicle inside are at a minimum 30 inches wide by 48 inches long. That used to be in the definition of a wheelchair, and that was removed, I want to say, in 2011 or 12. And now there is no sizing requirement for wheelchairs. Now there is, does the wheelchair fit in your securement area? And by the way, the minimum size of your securement area must be 30 by 48. So what is the guidance that I provide agencies with regards to the size of the wheelchair securement area on a vehicle? Of course, there is never anything wrong with meeting the minimum requirements of the ADA, right? We call that compliance. But I get so many questions from you all. I have a person in a really large wheelchair. We want to transport them, but it doesn't seem like they fit. So if we know we have some, significant number of passengers that are in oversized wheelchairs, maybe we should take that in consideration when we are ordering new vehicles. We tend to start outside in with vehicles. Oh, this is a beautiful vehicle. Oh, it's low floor. Oh, this is the one. And then we sort of figure out or find out later, oh, this is a standard size wheelchair securement area. And now we're going to have problems with that vehicle for years. I just spoke with someone at a recent conference on this very issue. They ordered vehicles that the state was offering. It was not any particular state. I won't go into specifics, but the state had a list of vehicles they could order from. They ordered a vehicle, the vehicle arrived, and the wheelchair securement area and the equipment, the way it was designed and placed, did not meet their needs. And they were very, very disappointed. And now they were stuck with that vehicle for years. So, yeah. And the guidance even says right here from the FTA in the discussion, exceeding the minimum specifications, right? Lifts that have 800-pound capacity or larger than 30 by 48 inch securement areas will accommodate larger and heavier wheelchairs. So if that is our goal, we should be purchasing, designing our vehicles to exceed the minimum requirements so that they meet the needs of these riders that have large, oversized wheelchairs. So that is my ADA tip for the day, if you will. Let's start rolling into your questions here. And I have a question. Number one, is there, and they may or may not be related to my topic, so I'm just going to go through them as they've been posted, okay? Is there a federal regulation on PCAs and an age limit for them? Great question. Well, there is a federal regulation on PCAs which says that PCAs are allowed on our vehicles. Okay, let's talk about fares. A PCA must be allowed to ride for free on paratransit only. You get to decide whether a PCA rides for free or has to pay a fare and all of your other services. So that's number one. Number two, we can only require a PCA, quote unquote, require a PCA when there is an existing safety issue that cannot be remedied with any other solution. So the best example of that is someone taking their seatbelts off while the vehicle is moving. There's nothing the driver can do to prevent someone from taking their wheelchair, or excuse me, their seatbelts off. There's also nothing we can do to lock someone into their seatbelts. That's unsafe. So the only solution that I have identified in all these years is the presence of a personal care attendant. So in that example, that may be one of the only examples we could move to quote unquote require that a PCA ride with that rider. But other than that, there's not a whole lot we can do to require that someone travel with a personal care attendant, right? Now, if the person is touching other people and doing these things, well, yes, maybe the only other solution there would be to transport them with a personal care attendant. So we have to be really, really careful. Specific to age limit and PCAs, there is no guidance on what is the age of a personal care attendant, minimum age, okay? So the way we would want to handle this so that it is fair and equitable and transparent is to have a public participation process where we work with the disability community and we receive feedback on at what age This is the feedback we would get from people with disabilities, with children in particular, right? We would want to get feedback on at what age are children assisting their parents with disabilities. You might be really, really surprised. Okay, and once we get that feedback, it could be 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years old, whatever it is. Each of your communities could have different feedback. All right, now with their feedback, we need to be reasonable and identify a policy. Hopefully, it is a policy that our community will support, but we would consider this to be something that we want to determine using a public participation process. Those of you that have taken my trainings, you know I am not a fan of just making up a policy and implementing it. That is not how we do the work, especially not the work of ADA paratransit. So anything that impacts people with disabilities, we need to be really careful. So I hope that answers that part of the question. Second part, should we allow riders to sit in the seat of a wheeled walker while on the lift? That is a tricky one, right? A walker, let's talk about it. Is a walker a wheelchair? 3 or more wheels, designed, modified, used by people with mobility disabilities, usable indoors. So, wow, is a walker a wheelchair? Maybe it is. So, I'm going to say here, I guess it really comes down to maybe this is something we need feedback from the disability community as well, right? I could definitely see the argument they can sit in that seat, and theoretically, you could, as long they have to be facing forward, right? Use the lap and shoulder belt with them. I'm comfortable with setting reasonable policies to ask, would you please consider transferring to a seat? It'll be much safer. And then hopefully most people will comply with that. But I'm not aware of any guidance on PC or on walkers. Most of the time we would say, all right, let's break down exactly how a walker was designed. This is going to affect my answer now. Walkers were designed to assist people with walking, and the seat is there for them to take a rest, right? Therefore, they can sit in a seat. So I'm going to say yes. I'm feeling now like it might be reasonable for us to have a policy, maybe a very, very strong recommendation, but even a policy that says that you must take a seat and we will secure your walker in the securement area if it cannot be folded. And I think that's reasonable. Okay. I did get a question last week. There was some kind of walker where they could only stand, they could never sit. And the question was, should we allow them to stand in their standing walker in the securement area? And so that's a great question too, isn't it? So these things are tricky, right? We need to do the best we can with the knowledge and guidance we have to come up with a reasonable policy. So that was a very, very good one. Thank you. Here's another question from our friends in San Antonio. Hope everyone's doing well there. Service animals on paratransit. Can we require that a passenger tell us when they are scheduling a trip and that they will have a service animal? I'm finding conflicting information on various ADA sites on this topic. Good question. I'm not aware of any guidance that says when a person must tell us that they have a service animal. Okay, so let's start with fixed route. In fixed route, people get to do whatever they want to do. They get to board, right? They have bags, they don't have bags. They have a wheelchair, they don't have a wheelchair. And so it's pretty much free and open in fixed route. We try to make paratransit a comparable service. That is the requirement, right? So I think it's definitely reasonable that we are asking during the reservation. Are you traveling with a wheelchair? Do you have a PCA? Do you have a service animal? Right? And then, but if they show up with a service animal in paratransit, I'm not sure why that's a problem. Right? Now we might have people that have allergies, right? But to request that they be transported without people with service animals, that would be a request for an accommodation. And we can approve or deny that request. Frankly, I would probably deny that request because that's an administrative burden and that makes my operation so much more difficult to now try to juggle who is where and on what vehicle and with what people. That's a lot of work. And I'm not a big fan of that. But agencies get to make choices. So I would never put an agency down for providing lots of different accommodations. We would consider that meeting the needs of the customer. And who can argue with that, right? So here I would say I'm not sure it's a problem that a person shows up with a service animal in paratransit. I don't know why that standard would be different than our standard in fixed route where they do not report that they are showing up with a service animal in fixed route. So I hope that answer is helpful. Maybe not the answer you want. Maybe you wanted me to direct you to exactly where it says to do this or to do that. And listen, there are just not a lot of topics where we are told exactly what to do, which is why I'm so busy and I help agencies make these decisions. I understand your culture. What are your policies? What issues do you have? Tell me about your disability community and the culture of your agency. And now I start helping you draft policy. So I do a lot of policies, rider's guides for paratransit, obviously all the trainings that I do. And I can come to your agency as well and do trainings, right? I do that a lot, most recently with DART in Dallas. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of agencies over the years. So here is another question. Paratransit applicant wrote on the application that they always need a PCA to use transit. But in the interview, they indicate that they will not be using a PCA for paratransit trips. They feel that it is not needed on paratransit. Okay, so they always use a PCA for fixed route, but they will not need a PCA for paratransit because it's not as busy as fixed route. Can we require it for a nonverbal passenger with cognitive disabilities on a temporary basis to see how they handle paratransit trips alone? So this is sort of, we are making a decision or we are impacting them in anticipation of something going wrong. So my guidance here, my opinion here would be we go by what they tell us. And if now we identify a safety issue, now we act on it. Does that make sense? So I know that can feel like, wait a minute, we need to wait for someone to fall or get injured before we do something about it. I don't like to frame it like that. The language that I use is we can't make decisions or negatively impact a passenger or create policies for a passenger in anticipation of something. We do it in response to something, okay? So I hope that makes sense to you. Next question. I have a passenger that my drivers are having a problem with. The gentleman is wearing a short skirt with boxers underneath, but sometimes he rides and the Lyft drivers are seeing something that causes them concern. I guess they are seeing their private parts, or I don't know what they're seeing. Are we able to do anything about it? Listen, if anyone is wearing a skirt, but the skirt is down, or the way that they're sitting went up on the lift, I can imagine, because now you're at eye level. I'm not sure there's anything we can do about this. Don't look, I guess, is what I would say to tell your staff. That could be kind of silly, right? Just don't look. But now, if the person is lifting their skirt, if the person is touching themselves or doing things that are inappropriate, obviously we have something to work with there. But if that is not the case, they're simply seated, then I'm just not sure what we can do about it. Maybe if we could figure out a very gentle, reasonable, respectful way to communicate, you know, would you please, please, please don't cross your, or I don't know. I don't know how we can do it without kind of overstepping those boundaries and maybe saying something disrespectful or inappropriate. So that's a tough one. But if they're not showing things, if they're not creating the scenario where someone sees their private parts or whatever it might be, then I'm just not sure what we can do about it. But maybe a gentle conversation away from other people in a very respectful manner. That was a good one. Here's another question. It seems like nursing homes are taking advantage of paratransit. Is there a way to charge more. I'm not really sure what that means. I think we need to reset our understanding of ADA paratransit. ADA is public transportation, and anyone can apply for paratransit, and if they qualify, they can use it for any and all of their trips. It is the same standard as the bus. So if you have nursing homes that have their clients, their residents, paratransit eligible and qualified, and they are calling to make paratransit trips to take them to the doctor and to the shirt and to the movies and to this and to do that. That's called using public transit services. So I'm very sorry, but there is nothing we can do about that. Now, is this facility trying to schedule group trips? There's nothing in the ADA that says you have to do group trips. Are they trying to schedule trips for people that are not ADA qualified? Well, that's, not required. So if they're trying to ask you to do things that are not required, you get to decide whether you are going to accommodate them or not. Okay. Um, Follow-up question, I think, on the walker. Can we strap someone down in a wheeled walker or not? Strap them meaning the seat belts. Well, I guess it's going to depend on what your policy is, right? I'm going to say policy is walkers are secured in the wheelchair securement area and the person must take a seat. That is going to be my official opinion on this. If your policy allows that and for them to sit in that securement area, and I don't know if there's any guidance of this in your the equipment manufacturer's um, uh, material, right? There's usually instructions on how to use their equipment. So maybe there's something in there that you could use and would be helpful. But I'm going to say, I always told no by my previous admin. Yeah, this is, our policies are so important. If we don't have a policy on something, like maybe you don't have a policy, what is a policy? A policy is something on paper. A policy is not something that we make up or is passed from one person to the next, because how are we supposed to hold passengers accountable for policies that aren't policies, that were never communicated to them, that they can't find anywhere? So we need to be really, really careful with that, okay? Can we refuse to take a patient if the nursing home does not have footrest for the wheelchair? I'm going to say the answer is no, unless there is a safety issue, not anticipation of a safety issue, right? So if the person is able to, without footrest, safely get on your vehicle and be transported, then we don't have an issue. There is no safety issue that exists. Next question. I have someone that turned a paratransit application without a physical address and a mailing address, and the mailing address is their counselor. Is it required for the applicant to have a physical address? Well, it seems like they do have a mailing address. So, we can't, I don't know that it's reasonable for us to pick and choose what information we are given. If we ask for an address to send them information, and that's the address that they gave us, then I think that's the address that we use. I would say that is a physical address. So from that perspective, I think we have what we need to move forward with managing the application. We can't control if it's sent to the no. We can't control whether our material, let's just say they are approved and we have an ID card and a rider's guide and we mail it to the address that they gave us and it never gets to them. We can't control that, right? That's also why we mail things certified, so we can prove that we did mail it out. If you're not mailing eligibility information and determinations certified, how can you prove that you mailed the information out? And how can you prove that you met the 21-day requirement, right? So we want to be really careful with that. And it's not enough to say you put a note on a piece of paper, I mailed it on this date. I mean, you could have written that at any time, right? Even if something is in the system, maybe that's a little more legitimate, a date in the system, but listen, we want to be very thorough. We can't have any misunderstandings because we're talking about people's civil rights here. Yeah. Next question. How you doing, Erica? Nice to have you on here once again. Can people on fixed route service refuse securement? So if you have a mandatory wheelchair securement policy on your fixed route, then you can require that the person have wheelchair securement. right? Now, here's where the challenge comes. A lot of agencies are also afraid to deny service. So we can't have it both ways. We can't both say require securement is mandatory, and then when we're challenged on it, say, okay, okay, fine, you can ride unsecured. I just don't feel like it's reasonable to do it both ways. So can we deny service if the policy says that people in securement areas must be secured? And the answer is yes, we can. Now, the real hard part begins, right? We are documenting that. We need the driver to fill out a miscellaneous report. We probably will send out a road supervisor. We're going to go through that process. We need to document it so that we can defend ourselves if needed because this is a real significant issue. So, next question. Can a PCA have a disability and would need to use the lift and the driver would need to make the accommodation? The answer is yes. People with disabilities, and the FTA is very clear on this in the ADA circular. PCAs can be assisted by other people with disabilities. So a PCA can be a person with a disability. How they board, listen, is the way they board. We are public transit. We assist people the way that they need it, as long as it is safe and within policy. Anyone wanting to board using the lift, ramp, etc., is absolutely reasonable. There's a follow-up question on our walker discussion. Yeah, we're talking about rollators, the walkers that have seats, right? Now you can close those and make them skinny, but sometimes they are permanently open, or someone has maybe an oxygen tank strapped to the seat of the walker. So there are lots of different devices out there, in which case we would, if our policy allows, secure it in the wheelchair securement area. Maybe there's space for it somewhere else. Depends on your vehicle, right? Do you have a sample template of the ADA application? We are in the middle of updating ours. Listen, you can go to any transit agency in the country that has paratransit and they will have their application there. So I would say um, you could get plenty. I mean, DART, Access Services in LA, OCTA in Orange County, Southern California, San Francisco Muni, Charlotte Cats. The list goes on and on and on. Now, I like a particular approach to creating the application, and I have a certain philosophy, and I like the content to be consistent. So I do work with agencies and update and create paratransit applications for them. So if you'd like some assistance with that, please do reach out to me. I'll type my email into chat, and it's there for you. So. Next question. We only have a few more minutes. Let's see here. Can you deny service with an individual due to visible bed bugs? The answer is yes. If you see them, we can do something about that. If someone tells you there's bed bugs, that does not meet the standard, okay? So you have to see them. You need to have objective information, right? An observation. So the answer to that would be yes. And now the hard part comes, once again, to document, right? Fill out reports, get a road supervisor out there, maybe getting pictures of them. If, we need to do that discreetly. Should we be rocking around and taking pictures of someone's wheelchair? That's not quite polite, but the answer is yes. When we have objective proof, observation of our seeing that, we can do something with that. Question, what's the best way to load ADA passengers in a wheelchair who bring large dogs with them? We operate fixed route with MCIs that have lifts and that can load the wheelchairs. That's a great question. I mean, we need to load them, and we absolutely need to load them with their service animal. So if the animal can sit on the lift next to the wheelchair, does the animal need to jump onto their lap? There's no specific guidance on how we do this. We just know we need to do it safely, and we should not separate the animal from their owner, because if we are requesting that they do that and something goes wrong, I see video of dogs running out into the street. Obviously, that might not be a professionally trained service animal, but remember, service animals can be trained by their owner, and so good question there. Two more questions. What's the best way to handle a situation where a paratransit passenger is requesting a specific vehicle type? This is what we would call a request for a modification of policy. They're asking ours for a specific bus for their rides due to having a larger lift that is easier to use to board when the vehicle loads near their driveway. This is a curb-to-curb service. So listen, just because there's a vehicle that is easier for them to load, it doesn't mean there's something unsafe about it, right? So we can, of course, we are required to receive and consider requests for accommodations or modifications of policy. There's nothing that states that we are required to provide accommodation. So I can't tell you whether you should provide the accommodation or not. You have to decide that based on your operations and your ability to manage sending particular vehicles to specific passengers. So this is a personal choice. I am a fan of a concept where if you are providing an accommodation to one person, how do we not, out of equity, an equitable approach, provide that accommodation to everyone that requests it? So we want to be really careful with that as well. Okay. Um, Last question here. What kind of feedback are you getting from agencies using the quantum wheelchair securement device? I think Q Straint does a great job with some of their products. I love the Q Pod system, which is a three strap securement system. The fourth point is a black pad, a bar, if you will. That is the fourth securement point. The quantum is very, very interesting. Um, the feedback that I get from passengers, and we tested it when I worked at Los Angeles Metro, the feedback is that people with disabilities in large part do not like to face the rear. Okay. Um, Let me direct you to Charlotte Katz. I believe Charlotte Katz is doing a very comprehensive testing of the quantum on their fixed route buses, and they've created some type of little enclosure and they've put a video screen so that people can see the front of the bus or what the bus sees as it's moving forward, even though the person is facing backwards. So I think that's really interesting. So, yeah, let's reach out to Charlotte Katz on that and see how their program is going. I think that could be very helpful. I'm starting to hear that maybe there are some cutaways out there that have the Quantum, which is a rear facing wheelchair securement system. It does not require the straps and the hooks. These bars go down and it pinches the wheelchair. So that works because the like 99.9% of accidents and issues are when a bus is moving forward. So the person facing in the rear would be leaning back into a giant pad, right? That's why they say it's very, very safe in an accident. So, so great question on that. And so, yeah, mixed, maybe not even saying mixed results would not be consistent with the feedback that I'm getting. People with disabilities just don't want to be facing the people that are sometimes yelling and screaming at them. Oh my God, now I'm going to be even more late to work because this person needs wheelchair securement, blah, 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 blah. So we want to be really, really careful with that type of issue, right? Forcing it. The ADA requires that there be at least one forward-facing wheelchair securement system on a vehicle. You could do both, put the Quantum in facing rear and a forward-facing securement, and now a person could choose forward or rear in the same location. We are doing Los Angeles Metro, all of their buses have rear and forward-facing securement systems. Not the Quantum, but a rear-facing securement system. So also reach out to Los Angeles Metro, not about the Quantum, but about rear-facing, okay? Yeah. Okay, two more quick questions. Are we required to accommodate a client who has dirt or unsafe driveway? If you've come to the conclusion that it is unsafe for your driver to walk on and or push a person's wheelchair, etc., on this ground, then yes, you can deny that service and say we can only provide service from I don't know, the sidewalk, if the sidewalk is there and it's concrete. So yes, if there is a legitimate safety issue, we need to document it and we need to be in a very good position to defend it if we are challenged. Then yes, we can deny service for that safety, right? And last question, can we refuse ADA rider future rides due to excessive no-shows? I think when we call it an ADA rider, we are calling someone who is paratransit eligible. And the answer is yes. We need to have a no-show policy, but it is a very, very high standard. So every agency should have a no-show policy, whether you enforce it or not, because you might need it. And we need to be very careful. It's something like a certain number of valid no-shows. Some no-shows are not valid. Uh, a certain number of valid no-shows, a minimum number of trips taken that month, and a percentage of those no-shows based on those trips taken. All three of those standards need to be. Can we ban them from riding? I don't know that we can ban them, but most no-show policies are something like first occurrence, 7-day suspension. Second occurrence, 14-day. Third and all future occurrences, 21 days, something like that. I don't think we can permanently ban them from service for that. So that is our time today. I hope that has been very, very helpful. Once again, I have a number of new webinars coming up: paratransit eligibility, improving driver training, enhancing driver oversight, managing the ADA complaints investigation process. And of course, I would love to see all of you in Hawaii. I know it's a beautiful place. We will be doing great work. If there's anything that I can do to help justify why this will be very, very helpful to you and or your agency, you will be returning home with the framework for an ADA compliance program. I know that most of you do not think of ADA compliance as a program. You think of it as a safety related element. How do I know that? Because almost all of you are addressing ADA compliance issues during your safety meetings, which means it doesn't have its own meeting, which means it really can't be its own program, right? So always here to be a resource for you. Whatever I can do to help support your services. I'm going to start in the future offering like 30-minute ADA evaluations. If you're interested, well, I will be sending this information out, and I will be sending you a survey once we schedule your 30-minute review, and then we'll go to it, and I'll just review the information you've provided, provide some of my feedback to you, and then
I can't find the mute button.
kind of go from there. So thank you again, all once again.
Hold on.
Email me if you ever need anything. And yes, Teresa, I hope to see you in Hawaii. You too as well, Kalani. I hope to see you at the trainings. I hope we work it all out. So thank you all, everyone. Have a wonderful, safe day. Keep doing great work because all of you make a difference in the world. All of you are making sure that people with disabilities and everyone that we transport is getting to live independent lives and enjoying the beautiful life that we have. So have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you so much.